The Stockholm International Water Institute is hosting World Water Week with the aim of advancing water, environmental issues, health issues, livelihood and poverty reduction agendas as pertains to water. Joining us now from Stockholm in Sweden is Jakob Granit, who's Program Director at the Stockholm International Water Institute. Thanks so much, Jakob, for your time. Let's talk about issues that are dominating the agenda there in Stockholm. It's issues around infrastructure to make water access easier. It's issues around delivery of water to communities. It's issues of governance in water. How are these being tackled?
Yes, correct. The overarching theme this year of the World Water Week is to understand how we secure water supplies for the growing urban populations. And of course this is a really growing challenge, and especially we can see that then in Africa. So we need to see how we can secure supplies through good water resources management, sort of through, probably in many cases through public services, but then also as we move up the value chain and provide water for supply and sanitation and other parts of the economy, we need to find other transaction models to ensure that delivery.
Yeah. All right. Now, for many African problems, the problems are twofold. There's the issue of access to water, as I said, and then there's the issue of affordability. What do you propose as solutions?
Well, when it comes to affordability, we need to recognize that many of the poorest citizens in our societies actually pay quite a lot of water, in many cases more than those people that can enjoy supply from their taps. So we need to find models where we can actually deliver these services that are innovative, cheaper and reliable to maintain people's health, so that they can also enjoy and be productive in the economy. And there is ongoing innovation in that area, but still much to be done to ensure that supply for the poorest part of the society.
All right, there seems to be a tension between industrial priorities and agricultural priorities. Just some research coming through from SAB, for instance, that I know you're also discussing out there in Stockholm, suggests that 90% of water that's needed for the brewery process is water that's needed in agriculture. So immediately manufacturers are faced with a tension and agricultural producers are faced with a tension, and we need both for economies to grow in Africa. How do we remove this tension?
Yes, of course there are many demands for the limited water resources that we have in Africa, and the issue is of course that water resources are spatially very unevenly distributed. So in certain parts we have more water than we need, and in some parts we don't have enough water. So Africa has traditionally tackled that through water transfers, but also through demand management, trying to reduce the demand in certain sectors. But of course this is an issue of trade-offs between different parts of the economy and improving the productivity, so that we squeeze up, for example in the agriculture sector, so we can get more productivity per crop, per drop of water. And as you note, the growing demand for also water for hydropower, for the industry, domestic supply, sort of those issues demand also more sophisticated water resource management tools and awareness amongst the consumers on how to share those assets.
You mentioned the power sector, and that's critical because of all the infrastructure drives in Africa. This is probably the most important that's needed just to power the continent as a whole. If you look at the situation in East Africa, electricity shortages at the moment because of the drought situation. So when nature starts to take control, it has a direct bearing on the economy as a whole. Should we be moving away from hydro sources of electricity, or how can we manage that process better so that industry is not compromised?
Well, I don't think we should move away from the hydropower opportunity if we can do it in the right manner. Africa as a whole has only 77% of its hydropower potential is developed, compared to Europe with over 75% of its potential developed. So there are large opportunities to do this better and store water. Also store water for not only for hydropower but for other uses across periods of droughts. So one strategy would be then to increase actually the reservoir capacity we have for multi-purpose use services, including hydropower and industry and urbanization. So that's one element of it, but also coupling that with managing water on the ground, the rainfall that we fall on the ground, through improving land coverage, for example, and reducing soil erosion.
I mean, talking about storing water, it raises the question of dams. Not enough dams are being built in Africa, and one would think that that's just where everybody should be beginning in the first instance. How do authorities in Africa respond to issues around water crises on the continent?
Well, that authorities on the issue of water, there are many. There are those authorities that have the overarching responsibility for management of the water resources in the nature, and those that are responsibility for supplying the growing urban populations, and then for agriculture purposes. So we have a whole suite of different authorities involved in this. But as we can see in Africa, due to having these resources, water very scarce, distributed across the continent, also regional collaboration will be very, very important. And there are promising examples of that. If we look at, for example, in Southern Africa, the Southern African Power Pool is a way that you can actually distribute virtual water through transferring electrons. So you can generate hydropower in one part of the continent and ship that benefit through electricity to other parts of the continent. So closer and stronger integration is definitely one way of dealing with the issue of water and energy across the region.
Let's talk about the consumer, the citizen in Africa, and we're quite lucky in South Africa because we're rated in the top 10 of having the best water quality, but that's not the case across the rest of the continent. Often people are susceptible to waterborne diseases, cholera and the like, because even when they have access to water, it's not safe to drink. What should be done in this regard?
Well, obviously, if we cannot resolve the issue of at a global scale, 1 billion people not having access to safe water and sanitation in Africa, the numbers are also very, very high. We will see these horrible events of cholera, which are many times related to periods of floods, especially as we have seen, unfortunately, happening in Southern Africa and Eastern Africa. So it's a combination then of ensuring that we can manage this and monitor the water resources we have, so we can prevent floods from happening, to spread these pathogens through the society. But of course also then ensuring that we can safely supply this water to our citizens. And you mentioned pricing, and pricing will be important in a part of that aspect to ensure that the service can continue over time.